Mexico should come to expect in terms of justice. And I will, in terms of my remarks, I will speak from the heart and as an executive of a law enforcement agency, but secondarily will defer to my partners, my team. And Brittany is a frontline prosecutor on the front lines of some of this important areas, but more importantly, she is an advocate for children that I'm so proud of. But she is one of the best litigators in the country when it comes to the court battles that play out. So when a family and a victim and a survivor finally courageously enter a courtroom, Brittany is one of those seasoned professionals that do not always get the credit in the headlines. But I'm excited, and so my remarks will gear toward deferring to her to explain some of the challenges of the law. And then secondly, Matt Baca and Jerry are kind of the policy experts that when we go into the legislature or some of the media rooms, they're always there to partner with survivors and are always answering the call 24/7. But the other individual that I'm excited to defer to in our panel remarks is Eliza Sultan, and not only is she an advocate in the community, that would be understating her role. She's also a courageous mother of victim or children, I should say, that were survivors of sexual abuse. And I've often told her that her voice is much more powerful than any elected official because she has gone through the system, understands where the gaps are, but more importantly, has courageously offered herself as a resource in this reform conversation. And I'll let her tell you a little bit about her courageous story and the courage of her children, and specifically her son. And the reason we know each other, the three of us, is unfortunately there's a case in which her family is the case study for why we need reform, and is also really the example of if there is systemic failures, she can walk you through where the system failed her, re-victimized her family, and now is a wonderful, presents herself as part of the solution. So let me set the landscape, and then I'll defer to Brittany and Eliza. You know, for years, I have become quite burnt out because there are axioms that I've come across, and there are great axioms that motivate me and all lead us all to the cusp of a solution for children. And then there's axioms that quite frankly burn me out, tire me, and often leave me wondering if we're going to make enough progress for children. So the axiom number one that I like to dispel is that everybody says they're for children. Everybody. I've never met an individual who doesn't say they want to advocate more for children. They want to protect children more. But seemingly, did I go offline here? Seemingly, it leaves me with an empty satisfaction in whether or not we're really protecting children. But another axiom that I've come across where Eliza and Brittany really represent a new norm is that we really, whether we're professionals, business leaders, thought leaders, that New Mexico should be a place that's judged truly by how we treat our children. And that is quickly where the rubber meets the road. And as it relates to our justice system, when a child finally courageously steps forward and is ready to tell the truth about the abuse they have suffered, the true tragedy begins that most of the crimes benefit from a child being afraid, statistically not likely coming forward, and then ultimately because they're children, they're really not believed in our society, or they're not supported in the way. So when you finally have an exceptional community leader and a hero of a child wanting to come forward and say they've been harmed whether it's in the school system or in a family setting, or even in our churches, the justice system really does not empower them. And the next nightmare truly begins. And Brittany and Eliza are the perfect triangle of a solution, and they'll get into that. But I don't believe our system of justice truly empowers children. I think that when a child finally steps forward, our justice system sometimes re-victimizes that child. I don't think our school systems and our law enforcement are built to try to protect that child once they step forward. I think the work only begins then. And so to me, I leave the landscape that when you finally do have a courageous child and they are empowered by a great mother like Eliza, or they finally find a prosecutor like Brittany, too often they are still held powerless when they walk into the court system. And so I want the legislature and this great partnership today, that if we take away what we're trying to accomplish, is that we're trying to get legislators and law enforcement leaders and school leaders to think and finally acknowledge that the child, even when they step forward, isn't treated like a survivor that should be believed. They're often met with layer after layer after layer, or barrier after barrier. And so even when you have a great leader like Brittany or Eliza, and I will say this, and I'll sum this up and I'll turn it over to them and I'll shut up. So the landscape is that when a child steps forward and has power, that we don't seek justice for that child, that we put them through harm's way, and we make it much harder on them. And they're the exception that steps forward. And then finally, we successfully prosecuted the case involving Eliza's brave little son, very young man, very young, brave man. And we put together a team of great prosecutors, of which Brittany works with firsthand. And so it is a case where we got some justice, but what got Eliza thinking a certain way, and myself and Brittany, is how many more cases fell through the cracks and what needs to be reformed within the witness evidence system that treats a child a little bit more with compassion and doesn't re-victimize them. So the landscape is not good for children who are abuse victims, and we have a lot of work to do. But really, it is a secondary black eye that we are set up in a way that doesn't really seek protection for the children that come forward in the justice system. So I just wanted to set that tone. That is my belief, both as a former lawmaker and now Attorney General, that we've got a lot of work to do in this area. But we have two of the, I believe, some of the best national talent in the country in Eliza and Brittany. And I don't know what order we go to. Teresa, would you like us to go to Brittany first and then go to Eliza second?
Yes, if Brittany can go first, and then we can continue on with Eliza.
Great. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, General. That was very kind of you to say. And then, of course, thank you all for having me here today. I feel very passionate about this topic involving child testimony. Just a little bit about me and my background is I've been a prosecuting attorney for the past 6 years and have focused on crimes against children, including physical and sexual abuse, human trafficking, which is including both labor and sex trafficking, as well as internet crimes against children, including child exploitation. I have taken approximately 30 felony child abuse cases to trial, all of which, for those cases, children have had to testify in front of a jury, in addition to being in front of their abuser. So that is my experience. And I want to let you all know a little bit more about the way in which I approach the prosecutions because of the way that the current rules are. And then I think that that will give a good way that we can look at this new bill. So currently, it is generally understood that children do have to testify at trial, with very few exceptions. So even though we currently do have a bill that would allow a child to give a videotaped deposition outside of the presence of the jury, that rule is rarely, if ever, used. And so I have never used it. Now, that does not mean by any means that the children that I have worked with or the young adults that I've worked with have not experienced trauma and have not experienced trauma even while testifying. In fact, I think a lot of the opposite is true, as I've seen a lot of nervousness, a lot of people who have been upset, who have been challenged while being on the stand. I'm incredibly fortunate to have worked with so many brave and amazing survivors, but I feel like it is sometimes difficult to be in a system where it is certainly not victim or family centered. We have a system, and I certainly want to uphold all the rights of the defendant, but our Constitution also includes rights for victims. And I think it's incredibly important that we also remember that they are also an important part of the truth-seeking and justice-seeking process, is that we're not just looking to quickly get through a trial or quickly get through this process, but that we are genuinely seeking the truth, and we want to create an environment that allows for children, witnesses, to speak their truth in front of a judge and in front of the jury. And so part of this truth-seeking process currently, because the expectation that children will testify before their offenders, we do a lot of preparation and a lot of work beforehand in the hopes that we can have children feel comfortable during that process. So for example, some things that we do include having children testify with courtroom dogs. We work a lot with CASA, and they are wonderful and we love them. And they often are very helpful in providing courtroom dogs that can help the children feel more comfortable. They often will also participate with us bringing the dogs for pretrial interviews or even just other opportunities when the children are coming to the office, because all of those stages are can be very stress inducing. And so we want to make sure that we have a courtroom dog there who can at least add some comfort and usually a little bit of levity, because the dogs are delightful and fun and funny for the children. So that is one of the many things that we do. We also try to allow to the, working within the court rules and within the court parameters for children to have comfort items while they are on the stand. So for example, we've had children play with Play-Doh. We've also had children draw while they're on the stand. And these are some things that can help children at least feel a little bit more comfortable. It may also be tools that we use that can help children disclose even further when they're on the stand. Some children, even when we have been working with them and they have had amazing support from family or maybe even some treatment and counseling, they still don't feel comfortable verbally disclosing the abuse. And so sometimes children may draw a picture or they may write out certain words that they don't want to verbally say. And so those are all some things we can do on the stand to help children feel a little bit more comfortable while testifying. Now, of course, we are in a different era now. For the past almost year, we have been in the era of COVID-19. And because of COVID-19, grand jury proceedings have not been occurring, at least throughout the state, but in the Second Judicial District in particular. In the Second Judicial District, grand jury is almost exclusively how crimes against children are brought before the court. So without grand jury, that means that then we have to proceed by preliminary hearing. And for those non-lawyers, and I apologize, but the biggest difference is that with a grand jury, the rules of evidence don't apply, which means that an officer can come in and testify and say, the child disclosed at a forensic interview or a safe house, and this is what they said. At a preliminary hearing, the rules of evidence do apply. And so the child themselves have to come in and testify to the court. So recently we have been doing preliminary hearings over Google Meets or the Polycom system at the Second Judicial District Court. And in my experience, even though the child is still having to testify before the offender, the fact that there is this video connection seems to be something that is incredibly helpful in at least creating a boundary in that sense. There are some other ways, of course, to get creative using the video medium. Some things that we have done include if it's over Google Meets and you can pin only one person's screen, we tell the court and we make sure it's okay with the court and with defense, but we have the child pin, for example, only myself on the screen so that they only see me when they're talking to me. They only see the defense attorney when they're talking to the defense attorney. That way they don't have to see the offender. Some other things that we haven't quite tried out yet, but that we've been thinking about include also requesting the offender to turn off their video. Again, they can still see and hear the child, but the child doesn't have to see or hear them. And so that really brings me to this bill and one of the biggest positives of this bill and the request, which is that this bill seeks to amend the current bill and the Victims of Crime Act to provide for the taking of video testimony for children and incapacitated adult witnesses. And so this is actually the two favorite parts of the bill are that it allows for video testimony and it includes incapacitated adult witnesses and victims because that previously has not been included in the court rules. The current court rules allow for children under the age of 16 to have the ability to testify at a videotape deposition, but it does not include incapacitated adults. So I think that both of those are incredibly important to have moving forward. And then of course, the opportunity to have video testimony. The bill doesn't say explicitly whether it's video testimony like this, so in terms of a Google Meets or a Zoom meeting, or it could also be a closed circuit video testimony. So that is commonly used in the federal court system. But either way, video testimony would allow for the child to be in a separate room while testifying and not have to testify directly in front of their offender. So this has the great potential of being a little bit more victim-centered in the testimony approach, that when we are asking a child to testify, we are automatically thinking a little bit more about their health and their well-being, while obviously being mindful of the defendant's rights. And that mindfulness and that victim-centered approach may help prevent any sort of re-victimization that may occur by having to testify. It is incredibly important, like I said, that we want to uphold the rights of defendants, but we also want to uphold the rights of victims. And so this type of bill that is thinking creatively and with a victim-centered approach might have the ability to make a difference for the children in New Mexico. One of the other things I wanted to mention that this bill is very helpful about is the current bill the current rule that we work under is similar in the sense that if a child is experiencing too much anxiety or trauma to testify in front of their offender, that can be brought up before the court, and a psychological evaluation by a mental health professional is not required. Both the current rule and the proposed bill allow for the child to be evaluated by a mental health professional. But the biggest difference is that the current bill has that mental health professional to be appointed by the court. And so it's not one party or the other party choosing a mental health professional, it is the court choosing the evaluator. Again, the court doesn't have to choose that evaluator at all, but it is someone that they can choose, which could offer, and Eliza and I were discussing this today, that one of the options then for that evaluator could be if the child already sees a mental health professional, that person could certainly be considered to provide that evaluation to the court. And so that is also something that can be incredibly helpful to allow for the court to, again, gain more information as to why the video testimony would be necessary, but then also would limit the trauma to the child. And on that same note, the current rule, there is committee commentary that does recognize that sometimes those evaluations can cause trauma in of themselves. But this proposed bill blatantly talks about that and discusses it. And I think that, again, that's very important. It shows the victim-centered approach that we want to have, and that we recognize, again, that mental health evaluations are incredibly important for the judicial system, upholding the rights of defendants, but we still don't need to forget completely about victims. And by ensuring that we are at least remembering that these evaluations can be traumatic, and that the court will blatantly take that into consideration, that is something that can make testifying as a child more victim friendly, and again, be a little bit more victim centered. So that's a little bit about me and about the bill, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that may come my way. But again, thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much for that, for all the amazing information in regards to the process and how you guys are helping support this bill. And now I want to go ahead and move forward to Eliza. And again, guys, just a reminder, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or also on Facebook Live. We are happy to answer them at the end of the training.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very grateful to the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Attorney General Hector Balderas, and Madam Deputy Attorney General Duchasi. I'm sorry if I mangled your last name. She was, honestly, they saved my children's lives. My case was successfully prosecuted by the Attorney General's office. Brian McKay was the children's prosecutor, and Casey Carmona was the victim advocate, and the whole special prosecutions team. I can't express my appreciation. What I'd like to do is, if it's all right, give a little history of how I got here. Why am I here? Why am I sharing this story with you? It's a very personal story. It's difficult for some people to hear about, but I think it's really important that it brings the conversation first to how did the disclosure happen. It's a pretty remarkable story. My brother, who lived in another state, had taken a training about child abuse, and it was a very basic training that basically he called me up one day really enthusiastic and said, Eliza, I took this training, and I had eventually took the training as well, but he said, and it's really basic. You teach your kids that if anybody touches their private parts, and you have to use the anatomically correct names for the private parts, you tell an adult, a trusted adult. And I said, but my children are 2 and 4. Don't you think that's a little small to have this conversation with them? And he said, absolutely not. He said, I think yesterday was the day to have the conversation, so I encourage you to have this conversation. One of the things that I like to say is that one of my things in life is I like to embrace awkwardness. And this was definitely an awkward conversation to have with a 2 and a 4-year-old. I sat them down and I said, I know this is a little strange, but I want to just tell you that if anybody touches you here or here, and I showed them and I made sure I used the correct words, I want you to tell mommy right away. And that's just pretty much what I told them. Then we moved on. Lo and behold, 6 months later, it was May 28th, 2017, my son's 5th birthday. My son had requested to go to his father's alone, which was a very big red flag in hindsight, because they never went anywhere separately because they're best friends, my kids. And my daughter, I'd given her a bath, and she was 2 and a half, I'm reminding you. She told me as clear as day, my dad is touching me here and it hurts me. And, you know, as any parent would, I grappled with what to do, what do I do? And that was a Sunday. And so on Tuesday, I talked to the children's counselor. They had been in counseling because of the divorce, and, you know, I wanted to make sure they were supported. I told the counselor what she had said, and the counselor said, you have to call the police immediately or I'll call the police. So I called the police that evening. They came over and they said, we're going to turn this over to the state police because the jurisdiction was in the county of San Miguel. And the next morning, my daughter had a SANE, a sexual assault nurse exam, and they found physical evidence of sexual assault on my daughter. And she was very clear with the disclosure that it was her father, and I can say that because he's been convicted. So the sexual assault nurse, I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, you know, once this bell was rung, you can never unring it. And what that means is that your life is going to be turned upside down, and the kids are going to have to testify in front of the offender. And I just want to make sure that you know this. And of course, I'd only ever seen Law and Order, so I assumed that what she meant was that the kid was going to be in, you know, another room, the judge's chambers or closed circuit or something like that. And so I said, okay, well, we'll do what we got to do. So basically what happened was the case was in another jurisdiction. It's a very overwhelmed jurisdiction. They had lost prosecutors. I think we went through 3 or 4 prosecutors, and the kids had to go meet with the prosecutors many times, and the prosecutors themselves were very kind. But the process itself, I think what is important to understand is that the trauma from the abuse is separate from the trauma of their experience with the justice system. Having to go, so we would go to the courthouse and they would give the children a tour and say, and your dad's going to be sitting here and you're going to be sitting here and the judge is going to be sitting here. And meanwhile, they're 2 and 4 years old. Let's remember, we're talking about babies. And I was very naive and thought, well, surely they're going to let them do this in the next room. Very quickly, I was educated on the fact that this was not going to happen. And so one of the things that the kids would ask me was, Mommy, what are we supposed to say? What are we supposed to say? And I said, you know, I can't tell you what to say. The only thing that I can tell you is to tell the truth and tell what you remember. And the only other thing I can say to you is to be brave. And this pretty much became our mantra for 2 years, 5 months, and 2 years, 4 months, and 5 days. That's how long it was from disclosure to conviction. And one of the things that happened as a result of this was that I realized that if we got through the battle of the court, that I was going to have to address this law somehow on the other side. I'm a bit of a pain in the activist, which means that once I get my teeth into something, I'm not going to let it go. We found our way to the Attorney General's office. I will say that I was very grateful to the people who helped me to find my way to the Attorney General's office. I met with them. I pled my case. But the problem is that one of the unintended consequences of the bail reform is that, like, an offender like this who didn't have a prior record was allowed out on bail and had his guns, made no secret of the fact that he had his guns. We had to move 9 times due to stalking. He actually was convicted of violating the order of protection, and then he was still out stalking me. So we ended up having to relocate. And so what happened was, the reason that I'm telling you this story is that my children were very lucky to have gotten justice. The offender got 36 years, well, plus 18, but 18 is concurrent. It's actually kind of funny that he got 36 years and the bill is 36, Senate Bill 36. And so, you know, the way I feel is that, like, by telling our story, we're coming out of the shadows for the kids who don't get justice. And one of the things that Attorney General Balderas told me at one point was that one of the ways that abusers silence their victims in New Mexico is because they know they're not going to be able to testify. And so the abuse continues. And then that ends up becoming, I was talking to Brittany earlier, that this becomes a societal problem, because you have abuse victims and then it goes on, and they usually, you know, there's not a lot of counseling available for some of these victims. We were very lucky to get the counseling. But it was really my son. It was after the trial, and we moved into another state. We had to move to another state because of the stalking. And this was one of the things that he wanted to, before the trial. Okay, yes, let's talk about the dog, because they did offer us the dog, and it was a nice offer. But my son's allergic. Of course, he's allergic to dogs. Well, of course, it would be that way. So that was not an option. And then the one item that he wanted to bring into court was a huge statue of Mother Mary, and that was not acceptable. So we just had to accept the fact that you have to be brave and you have to tell the truth and you have to tell what you can remember. That's the only thing I can do for you. And it was about a week before the trial. My son and I were having a talk, and I just want to make it clear that my daughter, who was 4, also had to testify, but she was not as nervous about it because she was a little younger. He said to me, "Mama," I said, "is there anything I can do that would make you feel safe?" And he said, "Yes, I want a police officer to accompany me to the courtroom." He said, "because I'm afraid that my dad's going to kill me." His father had threatened his life if he told about the abuse. My son knows where his father kept his guns because his father showed him his guns and told him that if he told about the abuse, that he was going to be killed. So my son was afraid that he was going to be attacked in the courtroom. He was afraid that, and I tried to explain all these protections in the courtroom, but he's 7, and the fact that this person was also his father. He loved this person, and that's what makes it so hard. It's like Brittany was saying, that it's a truth-finding expedition, and if you can make the victim feel more comfortable, they will be more likely to be more forthcoming about the extent of the abuse. And so I called up the state police. I love the New Mexico State Police. They did a fantastic job on our case, and I'm eternally grateful. Agent Jerry Santana was the lead on our case, and I'll never forget him. Anyhow, we called them up, and I called him up, and I said, "I know this is an unorthodox request, but I have a 7-year-old boy who's requested the presence of a police officer in the courtroom. Is this anything you could do?" And Sergeant Steve Martinez agreed. He met us at the courthouse, and he came and he sat behind the offender, and it made Henry feel safe. And so one of the things that I was told, I wasn't at the trial, obviously, I wasn't allowed in, but was that the defense asked my son during the testimony, "Did your mother tell you what to say?" And he said, "Yes, she told me to tell the truth." And that's exactly what they did. They told the truth, and I'm very proud of them. And I just don't think that this is something that children should have to go through. Children, a 7-year-old, and by the time we got to trial, 7 and 4. And so I'll end with this, which was that this was about 6 months after the conviction. October 3rd is our day of justice. We were in the bathroom, and Henry was in the bathtub, and he said, "Mama, we ought to choose a day each year where we celebrate justice and thank the people who helped us to get safe." And that's what made me realize that our battle wasn't over. We were done with the wreckage of the trial, and we're safe. Amen. Thank God. Thank you, Attorney General Balderas and your team. But so then I approached them again and said, I met with them. It was my birthday, actually. 2 years ago, I met with Attorney General Balderas and the whole team on my birthday. And I said, let's do something with this legislatively. This cannot continue to silence victims and give perpetrators give them a key to continuing to abuse children. My son had a nervous breakdown after testifying. He had to take Xanax, he had to take Valium, he had to take Klonopin. He missed 2 years of school because of just being in such a mess. They're both in counseling, intensive trauma counseling, and that's helping. It's definitely helping. But there isn't a day that goes by that I don't hear about the trial. And so we've decided that the way that we'll be able to move forward is when we can help other children in New Mexico not have to go through the trauma of what my children went through. And if the hell that we went through can help somebody else, then we'll be all right, and we can move forward. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Eliza. I just want to applaud you and thank you. I think in behalf of everybody watching this video and this recording and this webinar, on your courage and just standing up and being such an amazing advocate for all of those that need a voice. So I just want to say thank you. And with that being said, we now turn it over to Gwyn, who is our policy director at the coalition.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gwyn Kaitis with the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And Eliza, I am just so impressed with your determination and you and your sons wanting to help other children avoid what he had to go through or what they had to go through. And I'm so glad that you brought this to our attention and that we can help on it. It's such an important bill, and just to mention that Brittany had mentioned about the incapacitated adults. So we're really hopeful that in addition to children, this will help adults such as victims of domestic violence who frequently experience traumatic brain injuries. So this I think is a really good bill. We're really excited to be working on it. And what happens now, right? So the bill has been filed and talking points are being developed for this bill. And I would love to give those out to anybody who wants to do some advocacy around this bill with your legislators. So if you can just get in touch with me, and Terry, maybe you can put my email in the chat box. Because I think the more people that we have supporting this bill, the better it's going to be. But I have to say, I'm so impressed. I have never seen a bill with more support going into the legislative session. Eliza has done an absolutely amazing job of contacting like all the folks that need to get behind this bill. And it's just, I've never seen anything like it. I just have to say, you are definitely that, what did you call yourself? What was the term?
It's a pain in the activist.
Pain in the activist. I love that. And, you know, just the fact that you're going forward with this when really you could just, you know, try to get on with your lives is just so amazing. And so I encourage anybody that's listening to this webinar, get in touch with us and, you know, let's work together on getting this bill through. I think it's really important. New Mexico is one of the only states that does not allow for remote testimony for child victims. And so we really need to do more for our kids in this state. I mean, we're so far behind in pretty much everything. But this is really something that needs to happen. It needs to be done. That needs to be an option for people so that these kids aren't traumatized over and over and over again. And I think that's also, you know, why a lot of cases don't even go through trial, because of that intense trauma that they are feeling. And when they learn about court, and it's just, you know, Eliza said it, it's just so overwhelming. So people don't really know how to navigate that. And sometimes the cases just don't go forward for that reason. And these offenders get away with what they've done. So I think this is incredibly important. And just to take into account the emotional and psychological toll that this takes on kids is just, you know, we need to keep that in mind. And also, what was I going to say? Oh my God, sorry. I lost my notes. But anyway, for all kinds of reasons, this is an important bill. I would love for everybody to work on it. What we'll do now is to approach legislators, get their support. We're going to have our membership kind of trained to do virtual advocacy so that they can support this bill with their legislators. We have 30 programs around the state. So everybody, I hope, is going to reach out to their legislators in their areas, and we're going to get a lot of support on this bill. So I really, really appreciate it. Eliza.
Yeah, I just have one more thing to add. I think what you said, I'm so appreciative. My son, the other morning we were listening to something on the radio, and there was a word regret in the song, and my daughter asked what that meant, and he told her what that meant. And he said, you know what, Mama? I don't regret anything that happened with my poppy. He said, because now I'm helping other children. And it just took my breath away. He's 8 years old. And he's like my idol, because, you know, I don't know that I'd have the courage to do this without the support. And I just have to say, the support I've gotten, people can look me up on Facebook too. I'm on Facebook. I'm easy to find. So if you want to connect with me on this, please feel free to do that. And I'm just so incredibly grateful for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Eliza. We have so much support going on right now on Facebook as well as in the chat box. We are joined by Brian Colon, our state auditor. We're so happy to have you on here. A lot of people are probably going to start using your term, a pain in the activist. We have so many people on Facebook right now saying that they want to be that. And so I think you're setting the tone, and we are just so happy at the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence to have had this panel discussion to educate our community, but learn about everything behind this bill and why it's so important to support it. And so I thank you all for being here. Again, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat. But everything that I've seen is just so much support and outpour towards you, Eliza, and all the work that the Attorney General's office is doing. And again, we just appreciate everything that you're doing, Hector Balderas, and taking this on. And so I'll give it a little bit of time to allow people to ask questions if they have any. Go ahead.
Can you all hear me? I don't know.
Yes.
I'm still learning how to use Zoom. Obviously, you know why I was so impressed with Brittany and Eliza, right? And to the community, they are remarkable. But I also want to remind our great audience and the coalition, we really need to go at the legislature as well and ensure that this is pro-civil rights. So the confrontation clause, there is a couple tricks that naysayers like to use, and sometimes they don't want to infringe on the rights of a defendant. We are all about truth. We're about giving rights to defendant. We want to support the confrontation clause, but when it comes to children, their civil rights are just as important, and we're not upending the rights of individuals who are being thrust into the justice system. We're just simply asking for more tools and more resources, and understanding that children and trauma deserve a safe space in the justice system. And so there will be, and as the coalition is phenomenal at lobbying, we need to go at some of the naysayers and not let them use some of the old language or the old frames to push this issue off onto another year. They always say they're running out of time. There are no false choices here. Like I said earlier, this is pro-civil rights, this is pro-family, and this is about the rule of law on either side. And without Eliza's voice, a lot of times this issue would just kind of get thrust into the shadows and we would just lose cases. And so I just want to empower the coalition that we should all keep working and go at our other ACLU and all these other groups that might not always be on this issue. We can convince them that there are no false choices. We're not infringing on the rights of other individuals. And so I just want to remind our folks that we've got to go at the legislature, and so thank you for letting us use your platform, your very valuable platform.
And thank you so much, General. Definitely in the talking points, we're going to address the confrontation issue so that people know how to address that when it comes up with their legislators.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all so much for taking the time to be on this panel discussion. We at NMCADV are absolutely grateful to have you guys on and support you in this any way that we can, social media wise, communication wise, anything that you guys need. And so we're so excited to have all of you on here today. It's been an honor to have you guys here. And so with that being said, I don't see any questions on the chat. I don't see any questions on social media right now. But again, you guys are more than welcome to contact us. Head to our website at nmcadv.org. You can find all of our staff information there. If you guys would like to contact us individually, we are more than welcome. You are more than welcome to reach out to us, where we would be happy to support you in any way that we can. Keep an eye out. Follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram. We are always posting and trying to keep everything up to date for you all. And with that being said, thank you for joining us, and we hope you guys have a fantastic day and
Thank you.
relax and decompress. But thank you so much for all of your work.
Thank you very much.